is the way you respond to the spike. And so my response is, fine, I'm going to think about jumping in front of trains. I'll think about stabbing people. I had a dog when I was 18 that I loved a lot, and when it was near me, I thought of killing it for some reason. The thought popped into my head, this thing is so trusting and so loving, it would let me kill it, and so that conscious thought would pop into my head. And at that time, I wasn't a specialist with OCD, so I did think it was kind of bizarre and weird that I thought that. But now I look back on it and say, fine, I can think about killing this dog. I can think about stabbing my mother or whatever. I allow my brain to be creative and spontaneous and to basically send my consciousness anything that it wants. And I think that it's important to understand that you can't control this event from occurring, but you can influence it. And that's what the whole therapy involves, is I say to the clients, we're not going to get you to stop spiking. What we're going to get you to do is, if we're going to have a positive outcome, then your frequency of spiking will dramatically decrease only because your response to your spikes has been shifted tremendously to one of acceptance. Because when you accept having these thoughts, the brain no longer says, look out for it. This is an important mental event. So this is kind of, and I call this the neutral response. And one of the most common ways of producing this, and I'll get into this in more detail perhaps, is what I call letting it be there. When I spike about jumping in front of the train, ultimately I'm saying, okay, I kind of talk back to that spontaneous part of my brain and say, fine, I'm going to let that thought be there, killing myself. I'll let the thought be there, stabbing a friend. I'm not going to do anything to get rid of you. And I'm going to create space in my mind for your presence. And I'm going to allow your presence to always be there. And any time that I want to turn my attention to the idea of jumping in front of the train, I can do that and say, you're still there, and that's fine, and I still give you room in my brain. Because now that I know you're in this little mental pigeonhole, I can focus on other things. So, to me, this diagram is the most important aspect of treating the Puro, getting the person to not engage in that emotional response, but to become incredibly accepting of their mind's randomness and bizarreness and incredible diversity of potential cruelty.
Steve, do you want to take any questions? Because that's a break now and then proceed, or?
Sure. Are there any questions about this diagram?
No, not about the diagram.
Okay.
You had said before, if I interpreted correctly, I'm not sure I will, that if you accept yourself, if people who don't think of themselves have a high self-worth.
I think I said that if you believe that there are good people and bad people on this planet, and if you make any effort to become a better person, that you're doomed to low self-esteem.
Yeah, I didn't understand that. If you want to think if you want to think of yourself as a better person, you won't allow yourself to do that.
There's always going to be if you're human in my if you're human in my opinion, then I could prove to you, if I knew you very well, that you're a rotten schmuck. Basically, based on your history, I'm sure that you've done a lot of rotten schmucky things, and therefore I say, basically we're all just human and we all just do a lot of rotten schmucky things. Don't try to find evidence other than you're human. Don't try to become a better person. You can improve certain areas of your life, but if you try to improve your personhood globally, your brain will always find evidence why you're not, and it will always remind you of that, and that's why it's a fruitless effort.
Like a self-defeating type of thing?
Yeah, it's a little involved, and like I said, that's a whole nother lecture, and that's the Low Self-Esteem Foundation. Well, it does, because in the course of therapy with my clients, especially the responsibility OCs, because the thought says to them, if I don't engage in the ritual, this means that I'm a schmuck. I get them to not allow that possibility to exist of being a schmuck. And if the person says, when I spike about killing my mother, this is evidence that I'm a low-life scum, I get them to disavow the possibility of being a low-life scum. That you can only be a human as a label. Yes?
I was curious when you said that about people who have addictions versus people who have OCD. You said they're not related.
No.
Can you just...
They look a little simple. Sure.
Because it always kills me, like, this guy I know that smokes like crazy, but, he's furthest thing from being OCD, and I just think, like, oh, God, well, is that any different from me wanting to wash my hands 9 million times?
Yes.
Even wanting to smoke cigarettes 9 million
yes,
times
it
a
is.
day. That's what I understand.
OCD is an area that involves an escape or avoidance of anxiety, whereas addictions, there's a yearning toward a substance that the body kind of craves. You don't crave washing your hands. As a matter of fact, most people who wash their hands hate the idea that they wash their hands. But a person with cigarette smoking will crave something that, through some chemical process in the brain, gives them some type of a feeling that they look for.
Pleasure.
Yes. And it can be the same with a person who drinks alcohol. It's a sedative. And the alcohol creates a sensation that a person without alcohol kind of misses and feels not one without.
Then how does a person with OCD receive that pleasure that the guy gets when he smokes a cigarette?
You don't. In the absence of anxiety, you don't get pleasure. You just get homeostasis, just a natural feeling. So it's not an addiction. And if I can make a bit of a political comment, I'm not so much in favor of the Obsessive Compulsives Anonymous situation, because with alcoholism, I can tell you that as a psychologist, we don't know what the hell we're doing. There really isn't an effective treatment, unfortunately, for alcoholism, and AA is just about the best you can do. But with OCA, there is an effective treatment for OCD, and to go to a 12-step program with the idea that through some process the disorder will take, a vacation, I think is a bit of a misnomer. So that's just a political... I'm not against the organization, other than the idea that if people see this as treatment, as they do for alcoholism, then I think they're making a mistake.
OCD actually due to a chemical imbalance in the brain can be scientifically proven other than taking this white box test, for example?
I haven't heard of the white box test, but I definitely will comment on that.
Okay.
I think everything that we do has a biological origin, as in you can find on a PET scan, if you really get sophisticated in 20 years from now, which neuron is firing as I'm raising this hand. And so when I raise this hand, am I doing this because my neurons have fired, or is there something within me that says, okay, raise my hand now? And with OCD, what they've done with PET scans is said when this person is engaged in the obsessional anxiety, this part of the brain is misfiring. And I think that they've located into the thalamus. And they've also suggested that serotonin levels for people with OCD are different than those who don't have OCD. And I believe that, and it says nothing about whether this is biological or not as far as I'm concerned. Because 10 years ago, when phobias were a real big thing for behavior therapy, psychiatrists were saying phobics had different levels of some brain chemistry. And what behaviorists did back then, 10 years ago, was they documented that behavior therapy can actually change brain chemistry. And there was an interview done with Judith Rappaport where she quoted studies that have been done with rats that have shown that behavioral techniques can actually alter serotonin levels in the rats' brains. And they're now doing those studies with humans, taking PET scans before behavior therapy, during behavior therapy, and then more PET scans after. PET scan is it's like an X-ray of the brain that actually can show neural activity. And so when you've got a person who is in the middle of an obsessive compulsive episode, you can show on a PET scan, this is where things are going awry.
You have to get in and get your brain X-ray right in that time, though.
Yes. If you're a contamination obsessive compulsive, I'll take some toilet water, throw it on you, and we don't have a
Right
problem.
here, right now.
Exactly. It's not difficult with the contamination of things.
What?